see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
So, hi, it's Edwin Rutsch from the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy, and I'm here today with Molly Rowan Leach. And so thank you very much for joining me, Molly.
Oh, thank you, Edwin. It's great to be here with you.
So, just as a way of introduction, you have, I'm going to actually show it here, you have your Facebook page, which has a nice picture of the Dalai Lama and who is the Czech, the guy, the president?
Václav Havel.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Václav Havel is one of my very sincere and deep inspirations. His writings, some of which were composed during his imprisonment, during the occupation, the Soviet occupation and the communist regime, really influenced me at an early age. Living in Truth was one of them. Yeah. And I really love his, I mean, he just recently passed away, but one of his deep transmissions was the power of the powerlessness, or excuse me, the power of the powerless. And the ideological and the depth of the importance of the individual in societal transformation.
Well, you also have a website which I'll show here. It's called mollyrowanpresents.com, and it says here that you're doing PR and media liaison, and that you manage events and outreach publicity for internationally renowned peace builder James O'Day.
O'D.
Would you like to talk more about just about yourself, just as a way of introduction, about your website, what you're doing?
Sure. One of the things that I love most is to catalyze things that are good in the world. So it's a fairly basic principle upon which the more technical aspects of my professional life have been built. The basic principle of spreading good and truth and compassion and love in our world through education and the gift of our technology has been very exciting to me. I began working actually with James O'D, you mentioned him, former Amnesty International director and former president of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And I might mention Amnesty International Washington, D.C. director in 2004. And we worked there. I was there for 2 years, and I was very inspired by the principles upon which Noetics, the Noetic Sciences Institute was founded by Edgar Mitchell. Multiple ways of knowing, nous, the root word, noetic, multiple ways of knowing, and the experience actually that Edgar had when he was re-entering the Earth's atmosphere as an Apollo 14 astronaut. He was an MIT-trained scientist and realized that science could not quantify everything, that it was in and of itself very powerful in mirroring to us the nature of our reality and our existence as humans, but that there was also a bridge that of course the Dalai Lama is talking about in being built, science and spirituality. So that's where my journey began with James O'D. And we've worked together for a good portion of the last 8 years. I helped him with his first book, Creative Stress, and he's about to launch another book, Cultivating Peace, with Shift Books, coming on June 15th. Well, and it's a great honor to work with the people that I do. I also interview people from the global arena who are showing the way towards a new form of justice, towards a new form of understanding ourselves and each other. It's a great honor. It's fun. I get to work from home mostly. I have a home office. So,
well, that's what kind of what kind of got me interested in kind of the work that you were doing was those interviews you were doing with restorative justice, social healing community, and I think, and so you've interviewed some of the people working within in that community, and I've interviewed some as well, and I've been really interested in the relationship of empathy to restorative justice. And so I'm kind of like thrilled to talk to you about, how do we build a culture of empathy and do that within the justice system? Be the courts and the prisons, and kind of extends from there. And so I thought that's maybe how we would frame this discussion about how do we build a culture of empathy with restorative justice.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, first of all, let me thank you for what you are doing in the exploration of empathy and the use of technology for connecting us together, and for conversation and education. Relational aspects of creating and building a culture of empathy. We know that coming out of our separation is a part of this, and so with the gift of technology, we can do that in ways that connect us globally, which is a great gift.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that my inspiration for the teleseries that is a free series of Maestro-based telecouncils that people can dial into from anywhere in the world, was inspired by my own personal story of witnessing the criminal justice from the criminal justice system from the inside. And so perhaps I kind of feel moved to actually share a little bit about that to begin the conversation.
What inspired you to get involved in exploring the criminal justice system and transforming it?
So, first of all, our crises and our conflicts are a gift. I really believe that. And so the story for me began way back in 1995 when my mentally ill mother had a run-in, a very serious one, with the criminal justice system. She was a very healthy mentally ill woman. Her treatment was going really well over the course of her life, and unfortunately there was a misdiagnosis that caused her to have a terrible, terrible episode that involved a child. And so I was 25 at the time. And so that was the place where my world was blown open as far as I experienced anger. I experienced a lack of compassion for police officers. I ran the gamut of all that, probably would be natural for someone who is juxtaposed into a system and witnessing a system that seems so broken and so anti-empathic. And so at first my mother was, the judges understood that my mother had a serious illness and that she didn't belong in a prison. However, as we know, our prison systems have become de facto asylums, and they have become also, I believe the statistic, it's outrageous, for African American young men. Michelle Alexander reports that prisons are also our new Jim Crow. So my mother eventually, even after being on probation and house arrest for a couple of years, the community was so wounded around this incident and never had a chance to really truthfully dialogue and be real together in understanding what had occurred. We know that mental illness is stigmatized still in our culture. NAMI gives Fs to Idaho, where this incident occurred, for almost across the board their services. So She went into prison in 1999 in an orange jumpsuit and shackles, and both on her wrists, her waist, on the ankles, and that was where my own personal process of empathy began in its fullness, because I had to experience the confusion and the anger and the admitted pain in my own heart and judgment even of the prison guards and of even in subtle ways towards the system. I'm not saying I'm accepting of the system, but now I'm in a different place of empathizing with even the system itself, and understanding that the people that are within the criminal justice system are there also for their own wounding. You see, because every perpetrator is a victim as well, and in some ways the criminal justice system attracts people to be employed within it who need to fulfill some form of, to play out some form of control or of self-fulfillment, of feeling like they have meaning. So it's been a powerful journey that almost obliterated me, but it brought me to now. Here we are in 2012, or at least last year actually, was when I felt like I was ready. I mean, I'm no expert on anything, but I was ready to bring to the public arena the importance of what the truth is in the criminal justice system, what I've seen, who I've spoken to within it, including mostly women inmates, because of the fact that my mom's in a women's prison, and offering a form of education and of dialogue towards a bridge between how the system is now, because we do need to know what's really happening in there. We do need to know the facts that women who, for example, are giving birth while they're in prison are chained and shackled while they're in the act of giving life, and so there's cases of mentally ill who are put in the hole for their admission of their mental state of being. And so it's a system that clearly has human rights violations happening within it. And it's also profit motivated. Correctional Corporations of America recently, the CEO recently offered to buy out state prisons for cash money in order to have control over the prisons and to require that they stay 90% full. That's a basic quote, paraphrase from that document from Correctional Corporations of America. So then we turn from placing too much attention, but needed attention nonetheless, on the system as it is right now, the consciousness that underpins it. And in my feeling, we are building a culture of empathy right now, even within this system. You've interviewed Sylvia Clute, who is one of my heroines or heroes, if that's politically correct. She gives us a roadmap for understanding the consciousness behind our punitive system and the consciousness behind what a unitive system might look like and does feel like for many of us, which we wish to outpicture into systemic transformation. The bridge in my feeling and perception of all these incredible people that I've spoken with and shared with is that restorative justice provides that bridge between the punitive paradigm within the criminal justice system and striving towards a fully idealized, empathic societal system as it concerns the justice system. So how we build that. Might I share with you something that I wrote?
Sure. Yeah, great.
That kind of encapsulates it. It's a bit nonsensical, but it encapsulates from the heart how I feel about empathy.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Bear with me. Mm-hmm. Empathy. If you claim you have it, look more closely. Can it be had? If, on the other hand, you feel it and notice in the unspoken its transmission, and it checks out both in word and heart, then you may have had an encounter, yes, with empathy. Empathy is not of the brain, and yet very much of the brain. We are wired to empathize, and all our neuroscience proves this back to us. Those of us who still crave the cave of separateness, don't worry. Non-dual and empathic does not require that you lose your identity, just your ego's need to stay separate. Empathy springs forth from our ancestral wiring and a je ne sais quoi human force, a raison d'etre that supersedes our literal comprehension, and yet we know it when we see it, feel it, are touched by it. It opens doors, it builds bridges. It takes us to that resonance of our earth, the Schumann resonance, and matches our sound, light, and energetic up with the natural source of all that is. It says to you, I really hear you, while saying nothing at all. It puts on shoes that both fit you and every other person you encounter simultaneously. It is a gesture sprung forth from truth, from the base core of our existence, splashing ripples out as it grows. It comes at 3 a.m. unexpectedly, waking you in the midst of night, wide open to its truth. It is a transmission and an inherent river, both in form and essence. It grows one by one. It is exponential, and it cannot be mistaken.
Yeah, I get a sense that empathy is important to you.
Well, in all my conversations, and I bet you may share this sentiment, it points back to that space of consciousness, of paradigm, of worldview, and we're in such a place right now of deep shifting, of deep shifting, of having the faith to continue to roll up our sleeves and place the blocks, even though the bridge is only halfway built, per se.
Well, I'd asked you about a metaphor of empathy, because I've been finding that I like to kind of structure the dialogue around a metaphor, because it kind of creates an image. And so I asked you about a metaphor, and you said empathy was like a bridge, and I think a shoe, kind of a magic alchemize one's awareness. A pair of shoes that alchemize. I don't know. It sounded like a magic shoe to me. So.
It's like a magic shoe. Mm-hmm. In how it feels, and it fits you perfectly, but it also fits every other person perfectly that you're encountering. And so life brings us encounters continuously, and this shoe creates an inherent understanding without any need or effort. It opens a field that actually, the beautiful thing is, science is proving this stuff, that again, like I said in my little written piece, that the Schumann resonance is an actual field that is measured of the Earth's hertz, or I believe that's how, I'm not a scientist, but I believe that that's how it's referred to. And we have the same when we're wearing that shoe. And when we're wearing that shoe, that meaning that we are deeply listening. We are not just hearing, but we're able to take account of what's present in the room beyond the sensorial. There's so many stories that each of us bring to an encounter and perceptions. So somehow this shoe helps us to sift through those things, to come to a place of perhaps like a larger worldview picture, as if I'm watching this really cool cartoon screen of your life while we're still in conversation even. I'm seeing what's informed you. I'm feeling it. And I'm also understanding it, because then it helps me to make logical sense of, oh, wow, okay, maybe I don't necessarily agree with this person, but boy, you know, this has been their experience, and I'm experiencing it in a big picture way that helps me then to bring more sense into the moment and how our interaction is outpicturing and engaging.
Yeah, so empathy is like this magic shoe that you kind of put it on, and it's like your awareness kind of just opens up, and you kind of take the other person's experience, their history, kind of all of life and humanity, kind of have an awareness of all that. Is that
yes.
kind of a...
Yes. And there's something very powerful in that larger awareness. My colleague James O'D, in his book, calls it the witness. And we can do it for ourselves too. So it's not just about transmitting empathy for another in this way, but it's also transmitting empathy for ourselves by being present with our own encounters. Maybe nobody else is in the room, but how can we be a witness for our own experience? And I don't know all the answers, certainly, to how that works. This does feel like, empathy does feel like a koan in many ways, but there is this understanding that we come to through both the inward journey and the external journey. Perhaps somebody, I love the concept of paying it forward for this reason, you know, that it's a transmission of an authentic transmission of, you know, I'm giving you this gift. I'm signaling to you that this is a kind and safe place to be. I'm signaling to you something because out of my act of kindness, which is spontaneous, something is being transmitted between us that may and will carry forward from you beyond. And it feels to be the same with empathy, that somehow we are able to, by tactile experience, both in the mostly the nonverbal realm, but also in the action realm, become very aware of the power of empathy. I thought a lot about, well, is this a learned experience or an inherent experience, or could it be a both and?
Well, before we get into that, so we have this metaphor, these magic shoes of empathy, and you suddenly see, you put those on, and it's like you know, a new awareness of the other person, their kind of their wholeness, their history, their future, your awareness of yourself, your past, your future, and all the dimensions, and it all kind of, it's kind of like holding all this. It's this whole, you kind of hold this whole view at this consciousness or awareness at the same time. So if that's the metaphor for empathy, these magic shoes, what's the opposite of empathy, and what would be a metaphor for that?
A metaphor for me of the opposite of empathy, it takes me into a dark space, like just a place like a cave. In that piece that I wrote, I did refer to a cave. A cave could be a consciousness of separateness. A cave feels dark, and it feels perceptually dualistic. So that would be my sense of the opposite of these shoes.
Well, going from there, something I've been thinking of adding to that, to those metaphors, is okay, if we have a culture of empathy, you know, is it, well, we have kind of like this individual shoe that you put on, this individual cave. Is a culture of empathy everybody putting on these shoes, and a culture of the opposite being everybody in their caves? Or, you know what I mean? How do you kind of scale it up to at a cultural level, the metaphor?
Mm. That is such a good question. I'm not getting any immediate feels on how I would speak to that right now. Other than where it does take me is the importance of our lives right now in these times to blend our practices, to come off of the cushion, and really engage in the world. You know, we know the saying to be in the world but not of it. And there's a balance that is really yearning to be and become. And so being in the cave has its purpose. We're in a three-dimensional reality here that, in my own beliefs, is purposefully set up for our learning and growth. And so maybe, perhaps, the cave helps us then to come back to these shoes. And to put them on and try them out and say, oh, okay, maybe this isn't so scary after all to be out of the cave. Because I think that one of the metaphors of the cultural cave is we fear the loss of our perceived safety in keeping really tight in our identity, in keeping separate from you and us and one another. There's something about that gets underneath the shifting of our times, I believe, really underpins where our collective consciousness is right now, and it's unfolding, and it's heightening awareness. It blends the science that backs up the consciousness, that backs up the truth of coming home to certainly a unity that we share, a web of mutuality, but that we also, the good news is for the cave dwellers, that we retain uniqueness, and that's what makes it so beautiful. Mm-hmm. So how to get there, yeah, is interesting.
So how to find the relationship between the cave and the magic shoes? It seems like we have the qualities, both of those qualities, and it's like, how do we kind of integrate the two, or balance the two, or mesh the two, and building a culture of empathy. I kind of have this picture. Okay, it's time to crawl out of the cave. We're going to crawl out into the light. It's kind of bright. It's how do we do that? I kind of feel we're at that point now, and especially in the justice system. How are we going to transform the justice system? You had this personal story of having experienced the darkness that's there in the justice system, and people aren't being seen. They're not wearing their magic shoes. How do we get those magic shoes, on people who are the judges, the lawyers, the prison guards, the prisoners, the defendants, the prosecutor? It's kind of like somehow we got to create a culture of empathy in that system. We got to get everyone putting on those magic shoes.
And that's the whole of where we are right now. Relationship building and education really have such depth and power to them, without agenda. If we can remove our deep agendas and our tacit infrastructures and come back to the basic principle of offering compassion, of transmitting empathy, of agreeing to disagree, of seeing conflict as opportunity. I think about the Dalai Lama and how he works in his ways with the Chinese as being his teachers. And that doesn't remove him from taking action or any, he speaks to the importance of compassion and action coming together to help. I mean, one without the other is a fish on a bicycle a bit. But the two combined is where we begin to help dismantle the really what seems to be the pattern of a system that is completely punitive, even though it houses there's some incredible people within that system, and there's people that you've interviewed, that I've interviewed. There's so many that are within the system as it stands, doing what they can to plant a simple seed in their own way every day. Sylvia Clute, again, is an example of an attorney doing restorative circles in Virginia, and her book, Beyond Vengeance, Beyond Duality. And I've met, for example, the director of paroles and pardons in Idaho. He and I have had very good conversations about his awareness of the tragic circumstances of the mental health situation in that our prisons are de facto asylums, and how do we dismantle these patterns and the cycle of excusing ourselves from doing what's right because we think we don't have the funding for it. There's a small scale example here where I live in building bridges with the existing legal system, and being courageous enough to also address wounds and crime in the community here. Being courageous enough to understand that this is messy, to be real together in the aftermath of a crime, to understand that the bigger picture, again, the shoes that we can choose to put on, to understand that in any crime, there's at least three circles affected: the community, the victim, the author, as Dominic Barter refers to the perpetrator. as well as in our times right now, I believe a fourth circle here, if we were thinking of it as a Venn diagram, a fourth circle would be the existing legal system. Mm. The existing system is wounded as well. And so when we're addressing on a community level, which I feel is one of the most powerful places, individually, communally, to begin to shift this system, we're looking at, we're a work in progress. We're learning, we're cultivating training and education from existing pockets and programming. We know that restorative justice is not fully implemented in the United States criminal justice system, but there are many people doing different parts and pieces of it, family group conferencing. Mediation is not restorative justice, but it is a part and parcel of the process. So there's these satellites that are occurring and congealing together and finding each other. And while we're doing that connecting, we're also hoping to build trust, to provide education, but also inquiry with the existing legal system, with the victims, because some of them, of course, are very doubtful about the assurance of their safety, especially after violent crime. But Howard Zehr, the grandfather of our current modern restorative justice movement, which of course we know restorative justice is in fact old and ancient even, he is a deep proponent of the fact that we must come together and recognize the profound interconnectivity that we share.
So, something I was just thinking of in terms of the metaphor is that if we're kind of crawling out of the cave, right? Maybe it's good to crawl out with someone else. You don't have to crawl out on your own. And it's like get together with people and start talking about the process of crawling out. And maybe that's what these dialogues are a bit is, okay, we know we want to put on these magic shoes. We kind of got the intention. We know, what's out there a bit. And we're going to kind of work together to kind of talk our way into, slowly putting on those shoes together. Because right now it's kind of like this slow building. It's not like suddenly you put the shoes on. It's like even the shoes get, slowly put on. You got to lace them up and all that kind of stuff. I'm just building on the metaphor here.
Right. And Ming Lo did not move the mountain in, a day. And yet it was moved in a day. So the importance of patience in these processes and in the concerted understanding that we all hold within ourselves of what is right guides us. And I know that many of our leaders, that saw themselves simply as beacons of what we all know to be true, such as Gandhi, and Martin Luther King Jr., who is one of my deepest inspirations. What came through him was that cognizance that he may not get there to the mountaintop, but he knew and he saw it because it's a truth within us all. And yes, coming out of the cave is a process in this reality of building a bridge, of not frying. I mean, let's just say that we superimposed unitive justice onto the existing criminal justice system right now in this moment. What would occur would be sort of like voltage electricity frying a system. There just wouldn't be, to a certain degree, there probably would be a comprehension, but it wouldn't be able to integrate fully and properly.
I have a story, kind of experience that I was in the Soviet Union and then Russia, kind of when it fell apart. And I remember just meeting people. I mean, we were talking about a heavy, authoritarian, totalitarian kind of a system that's kind of like falling apart. And then they're starting to talk about market reforms. I mean, so you're kind of doing it out of a collapsed system. And people would say, what is this democracy? What is this market? What does that mean? And there was a huge amount of confusion. It's like it seems, so it's kind of like addressing that if you have a sudden shift of the system like that, it's very disorienting and very, and the not knowing how to deal with it kind of had a kind of return to kind of a more authoritarian way of being, because that's what people were familiar with. So there does seem to be kind of, how do we transition the system? So it's kind of a step-by-step, building process, so that maybe people's, so that the awareness gets wired into people's, not mirror neurons, but just neural networks, right? We're deepening those networks and knowing how to relate and how to interact, and
right, and again, that sense to me of really building relationships where they're non-existent right now. Within the criminal justice system, for example, again, there really are no systemic structures in place for there to be true dialogue or understanding, if that's what the victim and offender want. For example, it's restricted in many cases that an offender attempt to make an apology, even in a letter format, due to the way things are set up. And again, it's tricky to find that middle ground at times of, in light of being sensitive and in underscoring the importance of safety. Every single situation, every single crime and wounding has its own flavor and its own nuances. But there are very few links right now within the infrastructure of the system that point us towards the relational, that point us towards the repairing the relational. And in some cases that may take years or even a lifetime or even beyond. But and one of the things I love about restorative justice, from Dominic Barter's view and from Sylvia Klut's view, is the importance of not forcing. So again, inquiry-based relationship building. That is, to me, resonant of empathic relationship building, with the idea that it's appreciative inquiry. It's mutual. It's there's perhaps an unspoken understanding of equanimity and respect. So where there aren't bridges between communities, when a scenario occurs of wounding, where there isn't a bridge between a community and, say, the DA and the VA and the public defender, there can be a community effort through the restorative circles, the restorative justice principles, and it's an organic process from what I've witnessed within this community here of dedicated community members coming together to represent the whole. And we've recognized that it is very key and critical to place some form of inquiry with the legal system here in this area, to also place an inquiry with the existing mediation programs, with the existing youth programming, treatment programs, with the existing restorative justice programs as well that offer family conferencing. And from there, we also, are tending relationships with the direct people involved. not excusing what has happened, but recognizing it as requiring something much bigger than what our current system can provide. So in the long term, unitive and restorative justice really is to the benefit of every aspect of the justice system, including the bottom line.
Well, what you're kind of describing is, okay, you're kind of crawling out of the cave, and here's all the steps that are kind of involved. But if we even go back, we're in the cave, and it's all dark, and we're not, seeing anything. It's like, what is even giving us the intention to want to change things? Even going farther back for you, it seemed to be the intention is you were in that cave of the justice system, you're saying, this just is not working. It's like, there's too much pain, too much alienation, too much suffering. Like, this just is not working for me and the people that I see. So I'm going to try to find something else that works just because this is not working. So, and you could double down and say, well, it needs to be more authoritative and more alienating. I mean, that's one way of doing it. Or you can say, we can try this other. So I guess I'm wondering about that intention. It's like, what even gives you the energy, the drive to want to even consider, taking those steps?
I consider my own experiences of what I've witnessed as information that isn't just my own, but that it relates to the whole in a clarion call for the recognition of our equanimity and our equal importance in this world. And so the hierarchical aspect of the world that we've lived in is crumbling. And it's both a yearning from within as well as a dance with the external. And I mean, it's obvious that we do not permit. I mean, for me, the bottom line is my beliefs do not permit the death penalty. I do not believe in punishment as a form of retribution. I have very strong beliefs that aren't necessarily a result of what I've witnessed, but also who wouldn't be affected if they were in that cave. And I just can't imagine if somebody walked in to the hole, for example, in a prison with me or with whomever, and witnessed what is really actually happening in there. That direct experience would change. I think it would change them deeply. Even those who feel that the punitive system is the way, because there are many people out there that do believe in the death penalty and do believe that proportional revenge, as Sylvia Clute puts it so appropriately, I believe, to be actually the answer.
Yeah.
So what's calling me personally out of the cave is such an intersection of duty, of service, of truth, of having the gift of knowing and seeing viscerally the truth of what's within that system, and praying that by my story, through my story, and whatever tidbit of education or offerings that I provide through me, they're not about me, they're about the whole, and this that the journey that we are taking together out of that cave.
Yeah, so it's like you've seen the outside of the cave already, and it's like you want to say, hey, other people, I'm seeing you're still in the cave. Here's this, kind of fun place to be, something like that.
You're describing the Bodhisattva Vow.
Is it? What is that?
Well, my understanding of the Bodhisattva Vow and my love for many teachers in this world who are considered bodhisattvas, including the Dalai Lama, who is the embodiment of Avalokiteshvara, considered the great thousand-armed being of compassion. Is that we come back again and again to mirror the truth of our innermost essence for each other. We come back with a duty to stand, to be here until, as it says in the Bodhisattva Vow, until all sentient beings have been released from their suffering. The suffering being, of course, the cycle, or the maras of illusion, the cycle of fear, separateness, duality, and to help retrieve from the darkness of that illusion all beings across all space and time, until the very last one has come home to the truth of their innate good and their innate being and their innate connection with Source.
Well, I think what's so interesting about our times now is like people would say stuff like that and say, oh, that's all good and well, it's philosophy or religion. And, there's the reality of life. It's really a dark cave. It's been my experience or whatever. But now we have, the sciences starting to talk about this and saying, look, we're biologically wired for empathy, for mirror neurons, for, oxytocin that kind of arises. And so I think that's really something that's different about the, even the last, 10, 15 years now, that there's this flood of science coming out and just showing how, we have the capacity to be out in the light, in the sun. We also have the capacity to be in the cave. So they're both like capacities that we have, and we can show you how it works. And so it's a matter of saying, well, how do we build, the culture, the infrastructure that supports this, wearing the magic shoes and the light. I kind of see it, the magic shoes for me have a quality of light, not the darkness to it. So I think that's the part that's really kind of exciting now, is the science support for that. And that we're biologically, our biology, just the way that our body is built has that capacity. And it's just, how do we create social awareness and social structures that kind of support that? And that's what I see with restorative justice. And I'm even not really real comfortable with the term restorative justice, because justice for me has the metaphor of these scales, right? And that's kind of the dominant. And we're not talking about the scales, the weighing. We're kind of talking about the joining and coming. Something that's torn apart, something that's broken, something that's separate, bringing it back together in connection.
Right.
And
I love that you make this point, Edwin, because if I may.
Yeah, please jump in anytime.
I feel similarly in many ways to you in the in how it seems almost paradoxical to call it restorative justice, first of all, and it's not in the words themselves pointing towards the consciousness that underpins the principles. To me, when I think about restorative justice, I think about the Hunas and their traditions around making right and making whole, or pono, to make right, to balance, and it is inclusive of the whole in its process. When I think of, when I also, I also consider restorative justice in its name as being almost, oddly enough, an appropriate way to name the bridge, so as not to again fry a system that is the way it is, as we know the criminal justice system to be now, and then the deeper truth and resonance that I feel personally with, say, calling it unitive justice, which again is Sylvia Klut's coining. I believe it is hers, and transmits the golden rule. The golden rule, doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. Punitive justice being an eye for an eye or proportional revenge. So in some odd way, even though I feel at odds with the naming restorative justice, it does seem like an appropriate bridge nonetheless.
Yeah, it's not such a big jump. Like we say, we're going from justice to empathy. We're going to dump justice. We're going to go to empathy. It's like, what? You've got to be kidding. You know? So it's like you say, well, we're going from justice to restorative justice to justice to empathy or something. Right. So you kind of create a conceptual bridge to,
it's a conceptual consciousness gradation that makes it feasible for us to, welcome each other out of that cave, to have an inquiry of, well, this is how it's been before. Is this really working? And here's the places where restorative justice actually could possibly provide you even more sense of safety, while also addressing the root cause and core of the wounding for all involved, and taking appropriate actions now and in the future in mutual respect, and also in consensus to what these things might mean. That kind of, again, relationship building and inquiry and process that is inspired by, even a very tragic circumstance around a crime that may happen in a community. And since I happen to live in a smaller community, it's very interesting. I feel that we have a profound impetus here to provide a template for how this might happen for other communities. I know that there's other people doing just incredibly powerful work with restorative justice, restorative circles, and we're all learning from each other.
So you'd like to set it up in your community to kind of model it, to say, well, this is what it looks like, so you can see, before you get there, this is what this trip that we're taking, this is what it kind of, it's like kind of the vacation spot, right? We've got all these ads that show you what your holiday trip is going to be like when you go to the Bahamas or something. So if we can kind of show that and have a model of it, because there's not a lot of models out there, is the problem.
No, there's great resources, but not a lot of models in action. You're right. And so one of the tricks around a community that is committed to moving forward with the principles and the goals of restorative justice in action is the courage to face the inevitable doubt, the inevitable cave dwelling, the people within the system or in the community or wherever they may be, and especially in many cases the victims themselves, who have every right to feel a need for their safety and their process. So it's very, very delicate in moving forward in a way that keeps it very clear that not only is this an unfolding process and model that we're working as we go we're being honest, we're tapping on people like Howard Zer's work, but also our indigenous, looking towards talking circles, and what does that really mean to be in community together addressing something serious or not so serious. I mean, there's a whole gradation of crimes that can benefit from the power and commitment of a restorative circle.
Well,
and there's also cases where it won't apply, too. There are situations where there may not be consensus, or there be partial consensus for there to be dialogue, and that's honored as well.
Like you're talking about kind of building that bridge, the restorative justice bridge. Kind of my experience, or what I'm kind of looking to do, is actually to have a sense of clarity about that destination. And for me, that destination is, restorative empathy. Mm-hmm. And so that we create kind of a vision of transitioning to that. But then with restorative empathy, it gives the vision that, we need to, I think the word is like upstream or downstream, that you're creating systems, throughout school, they're nurturing empathy and connection, developing all those different processes of how do you resolve conflict. I mean, already way back in, first grade, kindergarten, preschool, so you already have that process kind of building all the way up to something that kind of needs it. And because it's all within kind of the empathic connection, that world where you kind of learn that process. And what I'm a little concerned about is I talked to Jack Cornfield, who does does a lot with meditation here. And he wanted Spirit Rock, exactly. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, since you're here. So he had said, he was wanting to bring empathy into the legal field. It was a talk he was giving at the law school here at UC Berkeley. And I said, well, empathy or mindfulness can also be used for the samurai, right? The samurai is getting calm, getting relaxed, so you can go out to battle and chop the head off of other people. So that mindfulness can be for that, kind of like a patch, on the system, or it can be the foundation of a restorative empathy system, where the focus is on that connection and kind of getting rid of the whole battle. So he says, well, I've taught, mindfulness to soldiers, and, they're going out there to be better snipers, more relaxed, more calm, so he said, what I'm hoping is that by going and doing that, it's like a stealth campaign to infuse that into the existing system. But I'm a bit skeptical because the existing system will just use it as a Band-Aid, on the existing system. So I'm kind of going for the, a sense that we need like a clear sense of where we're going with the restorative empathy process, so that we can say we need to get rid of the, the conflict, the war, and at least have that clear vision of where we're kind of going. And then how do we kind of get there? How do we build those bridges, but do it in a very open and transparent, and, we don't need it. I don't want a stealth campaign, I guess. I want and I think that's part of empathy, is that empathy is the more transparent we can be about it. It's one of the components for creating an empathic connection. Right. Absolutely.
And it may seem that I've said this a lot, but I go back to and really underscore too what you've said about transparency and vulnerability and creating a committed and safe container in one's own immediate realm to really be real with each other and directly evaluate what's needed. I mean, this is a behemoth. If we think about it, it is a behemoth of structural infrastructure insanity, and that really it involves almost every aspect of our society, not just the criminal justice system per se. So I appreciated how you were pointing towards, early childhood education and, parenting principles and nonviolent communication, all the skills that we can bring into our experience of humanness, that will inform this commitment in our immediate realm to build these bridges. Because, and I love how you also turn the attention towards, and I think I have a few times too, that we're building blocks and structures together as we go, but be not afraid that the answers are not difficult or over complicated. Really, we do have roadmaps in our history of how it might look again. I'm not saying that we have the communities that were like the indigenous or the aboriginal. I mean, the close-knitness and the structural aspects of it just simply aren't there in our Western society. However, we can take cues deeply from what has come before. And so the circle to me is also a symbol of empathy, for that reason, that we're coming full circle back to what we already know, like the poet T.S. Eliot mentions in some of his work. The circle in the form of how it looks in a room, how it feels in a room, in the nonverbal and the verbal realms. The talking stick processes can be implemented, re-implemented with our children. And as we do these small things and take these actions together to be in a transparent container in very, very fierce and realistic addressing of what's needed. And as we signal to each other that we're safe together in doing that, we begin to have the guidance, and also the players show up. It's very interesting. Like in our community group, we have a person who is excellent with addressing trauma. We have another person who is an incredible on-the-ground organizer and has spent time within the criminal justice system, working from within there. So how will it look in the future? We place our attention there as much as we can while we still address what is right now, in sending out signals, in building relationships with what is right now, and staying committed over the arc of time is really important right now too, because it offsets the naysayers and the doubts. And then we have, again, people from within the system, lawyers, holistic lawyers, and someone that I know who I spoke with on this series, Scott Peterson, who is looking at harnessing the power of peer pressure. He worked for the Department of Justice, and now he helps to implement peer sentencing or peer diversion programs, harnessing that power. So we have to be in that imaginal realm in many ways, sort of like the metaphor of diliquescence, with the caterpillar, not quite yet the butterfly, and that push and pull between the cells, the imaginal cells. We're in that moment right now of we're not so sure we want to become that butterfly, but it's really pulling us, and the cells of the caterpillar pulling us back to the cave, and here's the butterfly that represents the shoes, and the bigger picture story, the collective story, the meta story. I love that question, Edwin, of where it took me was to place my attention way down the road And way down the road takes me back to the thought of how in some African tribes, in our present times as well as in our history, knew that each person came in with a song. They even knew the song before the person was born. That song was shared and celebrated with the tribe. And when that child was born, the village gathered and celebrated. Now, when that child may move on to grow up and cause a wound or a crime, the community again came together to circle around that person and sing their song back to them. So how that outpictures in systemic structure and how we get from where we are now to there in building a culture of empathy and building an empathic justice system is the most courageous work that any of us could do in these times. And it's committed work, and it's visionary work, and it's not easy. But it might look like coming full circle back to what we've already seen in something like what I just described. And it could look like, again, the circle processes, of bringing those back much more deeply, of recognizing the importance of having a strong bond between the existing system, the community, the victim, the author, and any of the programs that could help support a person coming back to their song in full, a community coming back to their song in full, and of course the victims coming back to their song in full.
Well, we've been going for about an hour and 15 minutes, and so we probably should unfortunately bring this to a close, because we talked once before, and I kind of had the feeling we could really talk, explore, and and I just really enjoy talking with you and kind of exploring this. And I'm glad I have a friend here to crawl out of the cave together with. I feel us crawling, so.
Well, and let me just say too, Edwin, really quickly, for people who might be watching this in the future, there is an upsurge of networks and initiatives such as the Compassionate Cities campaign, and what you're doing with empathy, and the networking that's occurring both virtually and on the ground with these campaigns, the Departments of Peace initiatives, and the Cities of Peace initiatives, which encompass a virtual network as well as, again, on the ground connection. And so we are moving naturally and quite exponentially in that direction of connecting with each other. E.M. Forster said, "Only connect." That's our work.
Yeah, so we don't have to crawl out of the cave alone. We can get out there and connect with others to do it together. And there's a lot of resources available, and it's kind of a growing bunch of people wanting to crawl out put on those magic shoes. And
the cave, the beauty of empathy too is, from my lens, the appreciation of the lessons of the cave.
Yeah, it's not judging the cave. It's like it's just one place to be, and it was a time to be there. Now it's there's other options available.
Right. And to truly feel that cave while you're in that cave helps you even more so to perhaps come out of that cave.
Yeah, feel the damp walls, the moss growing, the bats, the mice, maybe yeah. Well, this is fun. I love these metaphors. I've been really getting into these metaphors, so thank you for also for kind of exploring it through metaphor. And I'd like to keep the dialogue going. Maybe we could have future dialogues or have some panels, and
Well, here's an invitation to you, Edwin. Why don't we propose, and we'll share more details in the coming month or so, but let's put on the map some form of panel discussion that uses this technology, and we'll talk about where we kind of wrapped up today around what is empathic justice and how will it look.
Yeah, the real nuts and bolts of it.
Right. Let's look at that. I love that. That's a golden question and opportunity for coalescing something. Nuts and bolts, infrastructure. We'll maybe perhaps find out what others might see coming.
Okay, so we'll put that on the calendar. Maybe we'll do that by email. And
okay.
See the world through other people's eyes. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.